Hey everyone, it's your buddy back again with another exciting fanfic, which is what if Naruto fully awakened during the fight with Haku. Part 2, Naruto x Hinata. If you enjoy this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more fanfics like this. Now, let's dive right into the fanfic. Naruto was more than happy to accompany the now curious Iruka to Ichiraku's. It had taken some time to evade the horde of young kunoichi potentials who were intent on petting Akai and to pry off Konohamaru, who had attached himself to Naruto's leg, demanding to know where his Oyabun and eternal rival had acquired such a fearsome assault animal. 21 bowls of ramen, 3 for Iruka and 18 for Naruto and Akai. Later Iruka was looking forlornly at his deflated wallet. The money had gone for a good purpose though, as his former student was now contently sitting back and lazily petting his new companion. The story had been equally good. Iruka could hardly believe all the stuff Naruto had told. The said boy suddenly became thoughtful as he remembered something that had been nagging him the past few weeks. In a sufficiently loud voice and innocent tone he asked, "Anyo Iruka-sensei, I've been wondering, what does masturbation mean?" Had he been eating at the time, Iruka would surely have choked on his ramen. As it was, he only suffered from a combination of massive face fault and excessive sweat dropping. The old man Ichiraku, who despite the new look had quickly welcomed his best customer, chuckled slightly while the waitress Ayame gasped and then blushed bright red. Grabbing Naruto by the collar, the now very embarrassed, Iruka dragged him outside into a side alley. Waving a finger in front of the amazed Naruto, he began to lecture about proper behavior in public. Naruto just blinked. Had he said something wrong? All he did was ask a simple question. Voicing this though stopped Iruka, who peered at him incredulously. "You really mean you don't know what that thing is?" After indicating negative, Naruto was again dragged away by Iruka, this time by hand, to a nearby bookstore. Steering Naruto towards a particular shelf, Iruka began to browse through the titles. He found what he was looking for and went to find the cashier to pay for his purchase, leaving Naruto to browse the shelf. There were many titles that he dismissed as outright weird or otherwise useless, but few caught his attention. Deciding to visit the store at a later date, he grabbed the one titled as Shinobi Field Operations for Dummies and headed for the counter. Iruka, having waited for Naruto to pay for his purchase, handed him a book labeled, Say Ed, for Dummies. Clearing his throat he began, "Naruto, you obviously are in the age where you need to know about things. I would love to sit down and talk things through with you, but my afternoon classes are starting soon and I can't skip them. This book should cover pretty much what I would say, so read it and I'll be ready to answer any questions you might have later," he added a mental hopefully. Naruto was now blushing. He might not know what that masturbation thingy was, but he certainly knew the word say. And judging by the reaction his question at the Ichiraku's caused, it most likely had to do something with say. Ew, gross, I hope that Kyuubi talking about things like that doesn't mean that she's a pervert. Thoughts such as that didn't sit well with Kyuubi, who began loudly object at the near blasphemous thought. Smirking at Iruka, and in his mind to Kyuubi, Naruto nodded and waved his goodbyes before heading home. At home he found Kakashi, who had invited himself in through the window, sitting on his kitchen counter. After returning the shin guards he had been using for the past weeks and receiving a pair of badly worn leather bracers and 2 scrolls, he was ordered to show up at the bridge leading to training area 12:30 the next morning. With also Naruto, you should start studying the jutsus available for genins in the shinobi library. The lazy Junin vanished, leaving Naruto to wonder what the hell he was supposed to do at the bridge. He had things to do, however, so he promptly tossed his backpack to the corner, grabbed the bracers and led Akai out of the house. He had noted, just as Kakashi had, that he needed new clothes. Deciding to take the more than subtly given advice and forego his usual orange jumpsuit, he began to head at the only ninja equipment store in town that didn't treat him like trash. The store was run by an elderly couple who had, on the occasion he had been in need of gear, been quite polite, even friendly towards the boy. He had noticed for one that they sold him items for the actual price, instead the usual inflated price he was forced to pay in many stores. What best suited him at the moment was the fact that in addition to weapons, scrolls and assorted pieces of shinobi gear, the store packed a selection of clothing designed specifically to meet the demands of ninjas. He let himself be carried away by the mystery of the 2 new scrolls he'd gotten. The eager fox boy was so out of it that he didn't notice he was being tailed. A good 50 yards away was a shape moving from shadow to shadow, rooftop to rooftop. Nor did he realize that he was about to collide with someone until it was too late. After hitting dead on with someone, he landed square on his butt and began to struggle to get up and apologize at the same time. Any apologies were effectively cut out by a loud, kawaii, that made him positive that he had run into a girl and that the said girl had noticed Akai. Quite frankly, he was amazed at what he called the Akai-chan syndrome, and its effect to females in particular. Taking a good look at the person he had run in, he recognized her as one of the girls in his class. I know her. She's one of Sakura's rivals in Sasuke fan club. Ah yes, the Ino pig. After helping the downed Yamanaka girl on her feet and making few moments of polite small talk, mostly about Sasuke-kun, and mostly because Ino didn't want to let go of the cute fox, Naruto tried again to retrieve Akai-chan and get away from the girl who was in the process of thoroughly petting the said animal. Ino had other plans though. Running into Naruto was a stroke of luck, seeing as how she could pump him for info regarding Sasuke-kun. Finding out more about the cute little thing Naruto had picked up somehow was an added bonus. She could use the animal as a pretense to visit Sasuke at Team 7's training ground. Also, like any other female of the human species, she was powerless to resist the idea of shopping, even shopping for someone else. She grabbed Naruto by the arm and dragged him towards the store, blissfully unaware of the mysterious person, hiding on the rooftop, glaring kunais at her back. Almost 2 hours later, a thoroughly exhausted Naruto, burdened by several bags, exited the shop. Ino had been almost as scary as Sakura-chan when she'd been selecting clothing for him. Seriously, the girl was tyrant, though Naruto had to admit that his new wardrobe wasn't all that bad. His old blue sandals had been replaced by black ones, and he now wore black pants and ankle wrappings similar to those used by Anbu. The fishnet shirt with elbow-length sleeves was something that, according to Ino, showed off his well-toned arms. He had been dubious about that but had relented in the fear that opposing Ino too much could be as hazardous to his health as riling up Sakura. Covering his chest, he had a sleeveless, dark gray vest that had, as the owners of the shop were proud to show, steel mesh woven into the fabric for additional protection and a collar that could be opened up to form a hood that would cover his entire head and face, effectively hiding his blonde hair. On his arms he wore dark brown, almost black bracers that now held the seal-engraved training plates within them. More curious was the contraption the store owner had made for Akai-chan. It was designed after the baby carrier, which while useful was still too bulky and colorful to be used on missions. Now Akai was being carried around in a modified fox carrier. Basically it was a long, padded bag that was semi-rigid on one side and could, depending on the situation easily and comfortably, for both Naruto and Akai, be positioned on any side of the carrier's body. In addition to the 2 only slightly varied sets of clothing, another vest, selected at Ino's insistence, that was similar to one worn by her teammate Shikamaru, and a set of underwear. Naruto also bought a light gray jacket, complete with steel meshing. He did, when Ino was not looking, also slip a set of dark blue clothing, that was the identical to the ones worn by Kakashi and Iruka, into the growing pile of purchases. Finally, having it all packed, he politely refused any further offers of help, including ominous offer to redo his hairstyle, from Ino, who seemed to be in a shopping-induced frenzy. Standing on the street outside the Shinobira's store and watching Ino bounce away humming a happy tune, Naruto came to the conclusion that he would never ever understand girls, no females in general, and their weird fascination for shopping. He shuddered at the memory of the feelings of glee and the multiple orders to pose in front of a mirror while trying on different clothes, that had come from Kyuubi, in Naruto's mind a serious blow to her image as a demon. Curiously, though he didn't notice it, the person who had been tailing him had vanished during his shopping spree. Also there was, though he didn't notice that either, a small pool of coagulating blood on a nearby rooftop. Unaware of these odd happenings, he squared his shoulders and began to lug the rather heavy bags home. After dinner, which he had made with his rather limited skills of cooking anything other than ramen, he decided that the jutsu scrolls could wait until next day and focused instead on the book Iruka had gotten him. After only a few minutes, Naruto, now sweating and with a radiant blush, was thankfully interrupted by Akai, who wanted her after-dinner play. Tossing a squeaky ball for her to retrieve didn't ease Naruto's mind though, and he soon decided to brave the book once more. Naruto managed to avoid death from nasal hemorrhaging, having his hair catch fire from blushing and dying by sheer embarrassment while reading the accursed book. He even began to wonder if using Warok no Jutsu and Harem no Jutsu was ethically acceptable. The odd thing is that Sasuke Tem didn't even bat an eye when I subjected him to Warok no Jutsu. Maybe he's one of those homosexuals or whatever. Or maybe having all those fangirls hanging on him since he was 10 has made him resistant or something. The pre-dawn air was refreshing. Taking a deep breath, Naruto stretched and let loose a contented sigh. It was almost 4:30, the time he was supposed to be here. Looking about, he couldn't see, smell or hear anyone in the vicinity. There were faint sounds coming from what he surmised was training ground 12. Why anyone would be training at this ungodly hour was a mystery to him though. Much to his amazement, Kakashi arrived only few minutes after the set time. Foregoing the usual explanations for his tardiness, seeing as he had arrived miraculously on time, Kakashi began to lead his student towards the training ground. Just before they got there, Kakashi stopped Naruto and looked at him sternly. Naruto, what I'm about to say is very important, so listen carefully. He waved his hand in the general direction of the now quite audible noise of flesh hitting something hard. You are going to attend extra taijutsu training every morning under the tutelage of Maida Guy. He is a taijutsu freak, to be frank, and he's bit. Kakashi cleared his throat before continuing. Anyway, he knows a lot about different taijutsu styles and has a student who's in need of sparring partner. Now I want to stress out two very, very important things. First, he considers me as his eternal rival, and is always challenging me to these ridiculous contests, so do your best there and don't give him any reason to challenge me more often. Second, now this is the most important thing I'm going to tell you. Even if he insists, it's not okay to wear green spandex. On that note, nice to see you looking like a real ninja, by the way. Green spandex. What the hell has Kakashi gotten me into now? Though I admit the part about this dude being a taijutsu freak sounds promising, even if a bit intimidating. Feeling Kyuubi think along the same lines, he finally got the answer to his unvoiced question. He had found the green beast of Konoha. His reaction of "holy crap, it wasn't a joke" was supplemented by a rather disturbing HMMMH, nice butt, from Kyuubi that forced him to suppress the urge to gag. Loud yell of Kakashi, my eternal rival, was the beginning of bizarre, at least in Naruto's mind, events. After series of loud, have you come to join the magnificent Rock Lee and myself in our quest for youthful passion? And, the fire of youth. And the light guy finally calmed down enough to notice Naruto, who had the look of a cornered animal in his eyes. Casting a questioning glance at Kakashi, who replied with intricate hand gestures, he turned towards Lee. Lee, to better understand your youthful passion, run 2 laps around Konoha. The said genin struck his nice guy pose, complete with the glittering teeth, and then became a green blur as he vanished from sight. Focusing on Naruto, the green-clad Junin became suddenly serious and businesslike. Short, Uzumaki Naruto-san, was more statement than question, not like there were many blonde demon vessels in the greater Konoha area. Turning his eyes to Kakashi, he asked, I take it that there is a reason you have brought this epitome of youthful passion, who is only rivaled by my very own Rock Lee, here this day. Perhaps you and he would like to join us in our pursuit of perfection. Kakashi nodded slightly. Guy, the Hokage has requested that you offer your assistance in bringing out the youthful potential of my most excellent pupil. Cringing beneath his mask, he went on. Naruto has an incredible potential in taijutsu because of his unique destiny. I believe that with a little coaching he could advance rapidly and in turn offer your Lee a worthy sparring partner. I would note that you have my permission to run him to the ground if you can. Seeing Guy nodding in ecstasy, he turned to the now horrified Naruto and said, well, Naruto, it would seem that you will be training every day from 4:30 to 7 with Guy and Lee. Oh, and Team 7 will meet for training tomorrow at 7:30 at the usual spot. Don't be late now. The last part went unnoticed by Naruto, who was going through a mantra of shit, this isn't happening over and over in his mind. He soon realized that Guy, or Guy Sensei as he came to call him soon enough, was talking to him. At the mention of training weights, he showed his bracers and explained that they were a gift from the Yondaime, who felt that he should get them as a compensation for his sacrifice. Soon after this they were joined by Lee, who immediately upon hearing that Naruto was to train with them began to greet his new training partner. After that they got down to business. Naruto noted that Guy Sensei, while being eccentric, was by no means stupid and knew his business. 500 kicks and punches later they had a break, after which Lee and Guy began to demonstrate basic taijutsu stances. Naruto was about to activate his Shinkugan but refrained from doing so by a sudden sting of guilt. He really didn't have any problems with using his eye ability against enemies, but he felt as if he was somehow cheating his new partner and sensei out of their hard-earned skills. Bringing attention to himself, he proceeded to explain his dujutsu to the now very interested pair. When he had reached the end of his explanation, both Guy and Lee were in tears and bawling about how the truthfulness of youth was glorious, and the like. Naruto got more than slightly nervous when they began to hug each other, and then, he nearly flipped at this, included him into a fierce group hug. After they had calmed, both of them vehemently insisted that he keep his eye ability activated, as it would still require flames of passion and hard work to gain any advantage. And then they trained. Naruto's schedule remained pretty much constant after that. His rigorous sparring sessions with Guy and Lee in the morning were followed by a quick shower and hasty sprint to Team 7's meeting place. After which they would either practice for several hours or do a mission, or possibly both. He had also read the Shinobi Field Operations Guide and had subsequently purchased more books suggested by the author. He also spent time trying to understand Hiraishin no Jutsu, but made little progress. He did discern that some special seals or marking were imperative to the process. When asked about this, Kakashi produced a set of shuriken and kunai engraved with the necessary seal, and gave what precious few bits of advice he had regarding the jutsu. He made more progress with the shuriken cage bunshin. That was really nothing more than an extension to his favorite jutsu. He was at the point where he could impress even Kakashi with the sheer number of shuriken clones he could create. Naruto also spent some of his time studying some basic genin level jutsus. He really didn't bother learning them, but rather tried to focus on knowing and identifying them. Another positive development was his fast building friendship with Lee, who, despite patterning himself after Maida Guy, was an overall nice guy. They had lot in common actually. Both were considered dropouts and were dead set on proving their nindo. They both worked hard and, in an interesting note, had similar experiences of being teamed with the Rookie of the Year of their respective groups. They also compared their training weights, Naruto trying to walk around wearing the insane leg weights that Lee used without any discomfort, and Lee testing out Naruto's bracers. He was impressed with them and promptly asked if Naruto knew where to get more such magnificent items. Naruto promised to look into the matter but couldn't guarantee that he would be able to procure another pair for Lee. Getting to know Lee better also led into another development. Within the week, Naruto noticed that he was spending another 3 hours every evening sparring with the ever-energetic taijutsu expert, and it paid off too, big time. He could literally feel himself growing stronger and faster, forcing him, much to Kakashi's amazement, up his weights again. And then there was the fact that his taijutsu was improving so fast that Lee had to actually stop holding back slightly. Naruto was feeling cheery. He was full of delicious ramen that he had devoured in vast quantities after returning from yet another successful and exciting mission. It had been the visit the beach day for Konoha's preschoolers, and the lucky Team 7 had been selected for lifeguard duty. It had been moderately fun to watch Sasuke brag about his swimming skills and then leave him to pick his jaw from the ground when Naruto had swiftly run across the water's surface to rescue the one and only potential victim of the day. Because it had been such a good day, Naruto was feeling playful and decided to notice Konohamaru, who had been shadowing him for the last few days. Not that Naruto really minded playing with Konohamaru and the trio of terror, but things had really been busy. This didn't really matter to Konohamaru, who beyond excited about the cool eyes and the fierce and powerful assault animal his Yoaban had acquired. Sighing inwardly, he promised to that he would play ninja the following day, and decided to actually spill the beans to Konohamaru, motioning the eager kid to follow him to their special training site. After a few moments of tense silence, Naruto asked his loyal follower what he knew about the Kyuubi. He quickly received the patented tale of Yondaimi's heroic battle with the demon and subsequent victory and death. Lifting Konohamaru by the neck, he placed the kid on the ground before himself and while staring him in the eyes said in a low voice, "That's not the whole truth. Kyuubi didn't die, she was simply sealed away. Sealed into the belly button of a newborn child, namely, me, Uzumaki Naruto." Konohamaru was gaping at Naruto. The silence continued unbroken until slowly he turned his eyes towards Akai, who was currently asleep in her pouch, then back to Naruto's face. He repeated this process several times and then began to shake. With a loud yell of, "No!" he turned and ran from the clearing, leaving behind a heartbroken Naruto. Maybe it's true, maybe I'll never be accepted. What Naruto didn't know was that the person who had been stalking him on several different occasions had also cried out in denial for the confession before wheeling around and running. He didn't know because the said person had been a good 100 yards away from Naruto and Konohamaru, and because Naruto was so immersed in his own misery that he didn't notice another person approaching until he heard a warning yap from Akai. Instincts kicking in, he rolled forward and turned around in mid-roll, ending in a loose ready position, ready to attack, defend or retreat as required. He relaxed when he noticed that the only person on the clearing was Ebisu, the closet pervert and Konohamaru's tutor. He failed to notice, however, that instead of the cold glaring eyes he'd been sporting before, there was now a healthy dose of admiration in those eyes. Clearing his throat, Ebisu spoke. "He's young, you know. Give him some time to think it over and I'm sure he'll be back to begging you to play ninja as usual." When Naruto only shook his head sadly, the elite Junin walked forward and ruffled the blonde's hair. This caused the boy look up in amazement. Was this really the same stuck-up closet pervert who'd stated that spending time with the likes of Naruto only served to make you dumber? It was a brave thing, Naruto-kun. You really should hint that maybe Kyuubi wasn't on her right mind when she attacked. That would help too. But right now the little whelp needs time to sort out his feelings. He then walked to the nearby vending machines and popped out 2 cans of soda. Tossing one to Naruto, he sat on the nearby log. "Seriously, Konohamaru has changed after he met you. Before it was hard to get him to train and now, it's hard to get him stop training. He used to idolize the Yondaime, now it's you. And then you go and drop a bomb like that on his lap without any warning." Smiling again, the closet pervert shook his head. "I'll talk to him tonight. Our Hokage-sama will, and by tomorrow he'll be pestering you about your assault animal." Finishing his soda, he turned to leave. "So don't worry, Naruto-kun, you will prove that you are not the monster fox, and people will change and believe you. I know I did." With that he vanished, presumably to track down his wayward student. Akai-chan decided that her Naru Onachan needed some comforting and began softly nuzzle her head against Naruto's cheek. The act had the desired effect as it brought out a bitter laugh followed by a slight smile. I'm really pathetic, aren't I, Nichan? Me, the one person who should know better than to hold prejudice against others, expecting a small kid to instantly process something that would probably cause brain overload on most adults. I owe him at least the benefit of a doubt, right? He was only responded by a more resolute head-butting, which meant that playtime was about to begin. He was happily surprised when, come next day, he was again being shadowed by a suspicious-looking, square rock that moved on its own. Whispering few choice instructions to Akai, he let the small kitsune ambush the rock in question. After being surprised by a sudden pounce of the fierce Akai, the infamous Konohamaru Corps made their appearance, namely they crawled out from underneath the box. Their loud demands about playing ninja made Sakura wonder exactly how, and why would a ninja go about playing ninja. She was in a bad mood anyway. Sasuke had turned down yet another offer for a date, and what was worse stated said that he considered Naruto to be more capable a ninja than her. She didn't even realize that she was staring at Naruto while thinking I'm below him the whole time. This caused Konohamaru, who was at the time whispering his apologies to Naruto, draw several wrong conclusions. Tapping Naruto on the hand, he whispered, "Not bad, bro, she's your this," and whipped out a pinky. The chain of events that followed was only natural when dealing with something as volatile as Sakura's temper. Naruto, noticing the danger signs, denied that he was associated with Sakura in any romantic way, which caused Konohamaru to again whisper, "Hey, I knew you could do better than some flat-chested forehead girl." Slowly, as if moving away from a snake that was ready to strike, Naruto began backing away from a very scary-looking Sakura, and then bolted along with the whole Konohamaru Corps. Naruto knew by instinct that no excuse would save him from a severe beating, even if he was innocent. Sakura would only say something along the lines that he'd influenced the brats or whatever. And they ran, until Konohamaru bumped into someone, a boy wearing makeup and a sand Hittite, who quickly grabbed the startled kid by his long scarf and pulled him into air. Naruto, upon seeing the struggling Konohamaru, quickly flashed his signature hand seal and charged, yelling, "Hey fatass! Let go of him!" He didn't make it to the stranger when suddenly something, guided by the makeup boy's finger movements, tripped him. Smiling conceitedly, he exclaimed, "Konoha genins are weak." His smile faltered though, when Konohamaru opened his mouth to display impressive fangs, which he promptly sunk into the offending weirdo's hand. Yelling in pain, the weirdo dropped the brat and swiftly placed a kick on his midsection, causing a poof of smoke from a vanishing clone. Looking about, he saw the small brat, the blonde brat, a pink-haired brat, and two other brats standing some distance from him. Basically, he hated brats, especially the blonde, who was grinning widely, so it was prudent to teach them a lesson. Not listening to the companion's objections, he whipped out the strange package he was carrying and was about to do something when he was interrupted by yet another stranger. A red-haired boy, who was hanging from a nearby tree, instantly brought out the scent of fear from the two other sand nins. Naruto could also feel hair rising at the back of his head. There was something about this guy. These thoughts were mirrored by Kyuubi, who was pacing nervously about in her cage. "Kit, activate the Shinkugan. There's a familiar and repulsive feel about this one, and be careful." Now quite cautious, Naruto channeled chakra into his eyes and instantly saw something wrong with the boy. The gourd that was on the boy's back was alive. It moved constantly, forming shapes of what looked like, well, he really didn't know what they looked like. He deactivated and reactivated his eyes just to make sure he wasn't seeing things. He wasn't. Kyuubi's growling was a sure sign of that. "Grr, that mad raccoon. Beware that one, Kit. He carries a bijou within him just like you, with the exception that his is quite insane, and judging from his insomniac looks and the look, the gourd only partially contained." After a lengthy conversation with Kyuubi, Naruto was brought back to the world of the living by Konohamaru, who was tugging his hand and muttering about Sasuke stealing the show from him. Blinking, Naruto took note that there indeed was Sasuke, playing the hero and questioning the sand ninjas as if he was the sole guardian of Konoha. After a short introductions, a staring match ensued between the newly introduced Sabaku no Gaara and Sasuke. Few moments of mutual staring passed until Gaara whirled around and turned to leave, only to be interrupted by a yell of, "Hey! Hey! What about me?" from Naruto. Shrugging in disdain, Gaara dismissed him with a short, "You got lucky with Kankuro, I'm not interested in the likes of you," that died in his throat, when Naruto tapped into Kyuubi's chakra and took a step forward. Gaara took a step too, only backwards. The guy he had pegged as a weak was now suddenly radiating power that sent Shukaku in insane whimpers of fear. And Shukaku feared nothing. Tamari and Kankuro also reeled back from the blonde. Having spent time with Gaara, they instantly recognized the feel of demonic chakra. Both lived in constant fear of Gaara snapping and feeding them to his sand, and now, Gaara had the same look of fear in his eyes. Kankuro gulped and began to make up plausible excuses to skip the exam. The prospect of facing someone who could instill fear in his little brother, someone he had just insulted, in combat didn't sound too good. Sasuke simply dismissed Naruto as a show-off, using some weird genjutsu or something to create that odd distortion behind him, PFF'd, wasting his time trying to look good or whatever. He should practice more or he'll be a liability in this Chunin exam, that is if he's even allowed to participate. At that he turned around without saying anything and began to stalk away from the others. Sakura and Konohamaru Core simply stared in bewilderment at the odd behavior of Suna Nins. Though Konohamaru had an inkling as to what Naruto had just pulled on them, he still couldn't bring himself to understand why the Sand Trio would react as they had. Oh well, time to do something about it. You show them, boss. We're counting on you. Naruto, thinking that he had Gaara's attention, stopped using Kyuubi's chakra and walked past the other Jinchuriki saying, "We need to talk, in private." Not stopping to see if Gaara was following, he began walking towards Team 7's training grounds. He smiled inwardly as he heard Gaara say, "You two tell Baki that I'll be late," and then the sound of footsteps, following him. It didn't take much talking, really. The mention of words like Possesion and partially contained did the trick, and soon enough Naruto was staring at very small seal positioned on the left side of Gaara's chest. This brat is lucky that Shukaku is completely insane. That's a 3-point seal that could barely hold a lesser demon. I guess that it's hard for the damnable raccoon to concentrate on anything for any given length of time. Should a more complex seal be placed over the existing, and quite shoddy I'd say, seal, it should effectively contain the bastard raccoon. Gaara readily, after assurances that he would most likely retain the use of his sand, agreed. Getting rid of the insane cackling, whispers, and being able to sleep without the fear of having his personality devoured simply sounded too tempting. Also, Shukaku was ranting and whimpering in fear about escaping the horrible beast and so on. To Gaara it was a payback of sorts to let the bastard suffer. The following day at midnight, Gaara, Naruto, Kakashi and the Hokage met at same training ground. After few questions from the old man and Kakashi, they proceeded with the sealing. The process consisted of Gaara removing his shirt, Kakashi painting several seals and circles, which Kyuubi using Naruto as a proxy checked, and the actual sealing, performed by the Sandame. All in all, the whole event was quite unremarkable were it not for the fact that there were two Jinchuriki present. Having put on his shirt, and noticing that his sand still responded to commands, he turned to everyone present. Fixing his gaze at Naruto, he offered, probably for the first time in his life, a profound thank you, and then vanished in a whirl of sand. Gaara slept like a baby that night. It had taken some effort to actually fall asleep after a lifetime of forced insomnia though. Incidentally, Kankuro, Tamari and Baki were wide awake and on high alert, ready to run far and fast should Suna no Shukaku decide to come out and play. They didn't sleep a wink and almost suffered a nervous breakdown when Gaara, yawning contentedly, emerged from his bedroom and offered them a good morning of all things. Kakashi was late and Sakura was bored, Sasuke was keeping up his cold facade and only responded with single words in reply for all her queries. Something really was missing, but she couldn't quite figure out what it was. Sighing, he noticed that Naruto had positioned himself comfortably against a tree and was reading something, again. Then she realized what was missing. Naruto wasn't bugging her like usual, he hadn't asked her for dates after their mission to Wave Country either. Suddenly a horrible idea formed in her mind. He's been reading those yellow and black books every day since we got back from Wave Country. Could it be that he's turning into a pervert like Kakashi-sensei? I'll beat the daylights out of him if it's a dirty book, that moron is so expressionable. With that, she stormed to now alarmed-looking Naruto and grabbed the book and began waving it about. Now you listen to me, Naruto. Just because you aren't as good as Sasuke-kun, you still don't need to go try and gain Sensei's favor by reading dirty books like him. She pointedly dismissed any objections and continued. See, Naruto, you should just train more. You can't learn anything from reading books like. She took a look at the title and ended, now surprised tone. These. Why the hell are you reading? Basic First Aid and Field Medicine for Dummies. Naruto tried to grab the book from now utterly dumbfounded Sakura and explained. Well, you see, Sakura-chan, I read this book about basic field operations and situations that you might encounter while on missions. The author suggested additional reading and this book was among the list. I'm just expanding my horizons or whatever. Nodding dumbly, Sakura handed the book back to Naruto and turned on her heel and walked, almost mechanically, towards another tree. She sat down in deep thought. Naruto is growing up or something. He's not the same Naruto that left with us to the wave. Maybe that first real brush of death changed him more than I realized. Hanging her head at the scolding from inner Sakura, maybe I really should stop putting him down so much. I mean, Sasuke-kun is probably right. Naruto might. No, Naruto is stronger than me. I know. I'll take Sasuke-kun's advice and train harder. I'll even ask Naruto for some training advice. If he can become strong, surely the most beautiful and talented kunoichi in Konoha can. She cheered up at the thought. The loud, hell yeah, from her inner self also helped, and subsequent dreams in which Sasuke noticed her strength and professed undying love. Sighing and blushing, she again wondered where on earth was Kakashi. The man in question was not far from the meeting place. He was busy though. He'd seen a girl with cyan hair and simply had to reread a part from Ika Ika Paradives Volume 2 that depicted a girl with similar hair doing interesting things. After some time of blushing beneath his mask and giggling almost girlishly, Kakashi checked the time and decided that he was sufficiently late. He appeared a moment later at the meeting place only to be knocked over by a loud yell of, "You're late." After making his patent excuses of cats, old ladies and the road of life in general, he handed his students some papers. I've nominated you guys to the Chunin selection exam. I know this is sudden, but here are your applications. It's up to you if you decide to show up or not. If you decide to attend, turn in your registration form at room 301 in the academy by 4 p.m. tomorrow. He fixed them with a lazy stare. Anyway, you'll need a genin leader for the test, so. His gaze turned from Sasuke, who simply said, "Peace. Naturally, it should be me, and you two better not hold me back." To Sakura, Sasuke-kun is the strongest and the best, and he's a leader. To Naruto, who remained quiet for some time. If Sasuke wasn't on this team, I'd nominate Sakura for leader. She's smartest and not prone to rushing into dangerous situations, but she'd do anything Sasuke would tell her to do regardless of the consequences, and thus it'd be a liability to have her as leader. Sasuke is strong all around, but on the other hand would simply rush into things and leave his team fend for themselves. He considers us as dead weight anyway. He ignored a freezing glare from Sasuke and dodged a blow aimed for his head from Sakura. As for me, I have keen senses that would be good for scouting and such, have been training other stuff too, but I don't know much about leadership or anything and would probably rush into a dangerous situation too, so I guess we've lucked out. Kakashi was positively surprised at Naruto's blunt admission of his shortcomings, and how he had pointed out strengths and weaknesses in his teammates. He called for a vote and not surprisingly the vote was Naruto. 1 Sasuke. 2, until he, much to Sakura's objection, decided to give his vote to Naruto. With the score now being tied, he suggested that they do a light sparring match using no weapons and only simulating offensive jutsus. It was time to see if Naruto had actually learned anything fancy after receiving his gifts from Kyuubi. The pair faced off and Sasuke, certain of his victory, didn't even bother to activate his Sharingan. Not that the Sharingan would have helped him, but at least he would have picked up a new technique. Going through his signature move, Naruto made 4 cage bunchins appear, then flashing through another set of hand seals he exclaimed, Kirigakure no Jutsu, releasing a massive amount of thick mist that quickly enveloped the area. Sasuke was momentarily taken back by the sudden appearance of the mist. So the dope has learned a new jutsu, I guess miracles do happen. He rushed around, fist leading at the sound from behind him, only to be caught from behind by multiple hand and legs that tied him down. He tried to struggle but to no avail as the cage bunshin swarmed over him. And then the mist cleared. There was the Rookie of the Year, prodigy of the vaunted Uchiha clan, Uchiha Sasuke, held down by 3 grinning bunchins while the 4th had its arm pulled back, fist ready to strike. Sakura nearly jumped out of her skin when give up Sasuke, or do I have to knock your lights out? Came from behind her. There was the real Naruto grinning widely and petting his cute fox. Receiving no answer from the boiling Sasuke, he looked at Kakashi, who declared Naruto as the winner of the match and as the new genin leader of Team 7. Standing up and glaring kunais at the happy Naruto, Sasuke grumbled something about, "You caught me by surprise, it won't happen again dead last." To which Naruto only sniffed an indifferent, "Doesn't matter. I won this one, subordinate-kun." When Team 7 arrived at the room 301, Naruto was in a really good mood. He'd totally humiliated Sasuke by politely asking Lee not to damage his sidekick before the exam when he challenged Sasuke. Lee, getting the hint, had happily agreed and added a needled barb of, "Guess he isn't as tough as he's said to be, what with losing to you in a simple taijutsu." Naruto had only smiled angelically and nodded in consent. At the door they were greeted by Kakashi, who happily stated, "Oh, so Sakura came too. Now we can properly take the exam. This test can only be taken in teams of 3, but you all came of your own free will. You guys make me proud, now go." Team 7 entered the room, leaving Kakashi behind in deep thought. I may have said that they are ready, but even those fearless kids may be shaking in their boots right now. His morbid thoughts were cut like a lightning by Naruto's loud voice. "My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I won't lose to you bastards." He sweat dropped. The Chunin selection exam had begun. TBC, later this week or early next week. Oyabun would stand for boss, or something. And if you don't know what konnichiwa means. Author's rant. Now first I need some info from you esteemed readers. 1. Does Sasuke refer Naruto as Dobi or Dope? I was partial to Dobi, but my Mikisoft word didn't recognize it as a word, and neither did any online dictionaries I tried. They did however say that dope would stand for a stupid person, adult. 2. Anyone know was that whole bridge guarding mission ranked as A or B mission? Kakashi said that it was a potential B mission, but 3. If anyone has any twisted ideas about pranks Naruto should pull, feel free to notify me. I already got Jiraiya pegged with spiked sake, ultimate taijutsu, and a strategically placed bunshin, P. If you wonder what Anbu wears, there's a neat picture of Kakashi in Anbu getup with his ninkins on chapter 90 of manga. I thought that the pants especially looked pretty cool and stuff. Also, I apologize if I offended any members of the Fairer S by stating that they are shopping crazy. I just witnessed a post-X Moss sale and I can tell you it wasn't a pretty sight, like sharks after a shipwreck they were, I tell you. Naruto is being stalked. Who is it? Why was there blood on roof? Dun dun dun. Stay tuned and find out if you didn't guess already. Sasuke was mildly annoyed. No, he was actually very annoyed. Since he'd lost to Naruto the previous day, he'd been pondering the enigma that was this new and improved Dobi. First, he'd pulled out a technique used by another village, something he was sure the moron hadn't picked up just by seeing Zabuza perform it once. Then he'd exhibited a great amount of stealth and had actually managed to pull one over and humiliate him. I'm going to squeeze out the info about his new skills after or during this damn exam. I just wish he would shut up about being the leader of my team, obviously just a fluke, but still it makes me look bad. He had been dead set on doing the said squeezing after his match with Naruto the previous day, but the Dobi had simply vanished afterwards. He wasn't even at the Ichiraku's, nor was he home or in any of his usual training spots. Sasuke had abandoned his search well after 9, only to miss the object of his fervent search returning from a psyching session, which involved only slight warm-ups, with Lee and Guy Sensei. When Naruto had appeared to the academy, there wasn't the time, or the privacy, to grill him about his abilities, and Sasuke was yet again forced to delay the inevitable. He vowed that the Dobi's secrets would be his soon enough. After entering, he'd gotten to a slightly better mood though. There had been a slight scuffle at the door to the fake room 301, which had been stopped by a weird green spandex wearing genin. Then he'd met someone who really piqued his interest, Hyuga Neji, last year's Rookie of the Year, and reputedly the greatest genius born in the Hyuga clan in 100 years. Incidentally, Sasuke was appalled that someone could be so arrogant and overconfident as the said boy was. Nonetheless, here, finally, was someone worthy to fight. Naruto had naturally ruined the moment by giving an order of, stop that pointless staring contest and let's go already. His mood, already sufficiently dark, was about to get worse when Lee appeared and challenged him to a fight, that was prevented by Naruto, who politely asked Lee not to damage his sidekick. He'd been seething since then, devising ways to make Naruto suffer. The said boy was in a tight spot at the moment. Ino had jumped out of the blue and latched herself to Sasuke, squeaking a delighted, "Sasuke-kun, you are late." "You too, Naruto-kun," which caused an instant reaction from Sakura, who jumped to defend her claim on Sasuke. Naruto felt threatened. He was in between two scary girls who would probably beat him into a pulp if he sided with either one. Luckily, he was rescued by appearance of Nara Shikamaru and Akamichi Choji, who were soon followed by Team 8. Using the distraction that these new arrivals caused, Naruto was able to slip away from the bickering girls and into relative safety of the other rookies. Inuzuka Kiba, or Dog Boy as Naruto dubbed him, was bragging to Sasuke about how they had trained a lot and would kick everyone's ass. So Naruto decided that aloud, "Shut up. Sasuke might lose, but I won't lose to the likes of you," was in order. His proclamation was answered by very faint and stuttering voice belonging to Hyuga Hinata, who was, in his opinion, a weird and shy girl who always looked away when he looked at her. Kyuubi giggled for some reason at this mental description of the girl. Keeping her eyes downcast, and using all her willpower not to faint or get yet another nosebleed, the images of Naruto in the process of removing his pants was permanently imprinted into her mind. She managed to stutter out a, "Gomen Naruto-kun, Kiba-kun didn't mean it in that way," which caused Kiba to raise an eyebrow at her. "Damn, there she goes again. Can't she realize that if she wants to make me jealous, she should pick someone more plausible as a fake target of affection than that moron?" The third member of Team 8, Aburame Shino, didn't say anything but took note of Kiba's reaction. "Damn, there he goes again. Why is he so dead set on the idea that Hinata-chan is in love with him and is only trying to make him jealous by getting all tongue-tied on the mere mention of Naruto? Seems that Naruto is over Sakura too. This could get messy if he realizes that Hinata is head over heels for him and decides that he too might like her." The situation was escalating. Hinata had let out a surprisingly loud, "kawaii," after having noticed Akai-chan peeking from her carry pouch and had made beeline towards the said fox. Kiba, and to an extent Akamaru, who immensely enjoyed the prolonged petting sessions he got from Hinata, instantly felt surges of jealousy and rushed forward to protect their interests, causing Shino to move forward and restrain the dog boy and his dog. Hinata, on the other hand, suddenly became aware that she was only an arm's length away from the object of her affections and petting something that she had snatched from Naruto-kun. Mortified by the situation, she was barely able to hear Naruto, who was currently saying something about Akai-chan and I think she likes you, promptly handed the fox back to Naruto while sputtering out apologies and then quickly hid behind Shino's back. This volatile situation was diffused by the arrival of a silver-haired genin who introduced himself as Kabuto and warned them against attracting too much attention. He then proceeded to explain how he was a seventh-time veteran and volunteered to give a few tips to the rookies of the bunch. He then flashed out a deck of cards and began to explain how his nin info cards worked. Soon enough, Sasuke was hooked and asked, "Do you have individual info cards? And if so, would you happen to have info on Sabaku no Gaara of the Sand, Rock Lee and Uzumaki Naruto of the Leaf?" Kabuto nodded and said, "You have their names, should be easy then." Whipping out cards on Lee and Gaara, he explained the basics on them. When he was about to turn over Naruto's card, the fox boy in question decided to cut in. "You know Sasuke-tem, if you want to know about me, you could just ask." Kabuto raised an eyebrow over his glasses. "You are Naruto-kun." Seeing him nod, he quickly scanned the contents of the card and looked over at the boy again. "There's some interesting stuff in this card." He nodded towards the other rookies. "Is it okay for me to show it to them?" Naruto pondered for a moment. There could be stuff about Kyuubi there, though he doubted that. "Can I see it first?" he asked and was immediately given the card. Looking it over, he handed it back to Kabuto and shrugged. "Yeah, sure, though I think that bit about my academy graduation is supposed to be classified or something. But then again, maybe not." This conversation had naturally piqued everyone's curiosity and they were now dying to see the card, especially Sasuke, who was ready to make a grab for the said card had Naruto declined to show it. Whipping the card around, Kabuto held it up for everyone to see. Uzumaki Naruto. Worst in his class in every subject. His graduation from the academy was rather unusual as well. After failing to produce a viable bunshin during the exam, he was tricked by a teacher to break into the Hokage Tower and steal a forbidden scroll of seals. He then saved another teacher and defeated the traitor using Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, a Junin-level technique that he'd mastered in space of few hours. Checking the card again for more info, he continued. After graduating, was placed into Genin Team 7. Mission record is D rank 19, B rank 1, A rank 1. While successfully completed A and B rank missions as a Genin, that's fairly unusual. He stopped for a moment. According to my info, his taijutsu and ninjutsu are average at best and genjutsu below that. He hasn't been rated for those recently though, so it's hard to say. It also says here that he has recently activated a dormant bloodline limit which grants him enhanced senses. Not bad. Raising an eyebrow in surprise, he continued. Stamina and chakra are off the charts for a Genin, probably somewhere between Chunin and Junin. Also, report from his teachers and Junin instructor states that he is loud. Flipping Naruto's card back into the deck, he looked back at the rookies who were more or less intimidated by the realization that they were in a serious situation and would be competing against the best the other villages would have to offer. Naruto had even begun to shake, making Kabuto think that maybe he wasn't so confident as he was reputed to be. Sakura was about to cheer him up when the blonde let loose a deafening, "My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I won't lose to you bastards." Followed by a loud, "You got that." And a delighted, "Ah, that felt great." This bold, others would describe it as suicidal, declaration caused a multitude of reactions. Gaara simply shrugged. He wasn't going to pick a fight with other Jinchuriki, and told his brother to shut up and stay away from Naruto. Neji scoffed when Lee pumped his fist in the air and declared something about the power of youth and Naruto in particular, while Tenten simply shrugged. Kiba was sort of pissed for Naruto hogging the spotlight but decided that it would only make him look worse when he'd get his butt kicked later in the exam. As for the rest, Ino bonked Sakura on the head after she stated that Naruto is too stupid to be intimidated. And Hinata was simply blushing and twiddling her fingers while repeating Naruto-kun, so strong, brave, Naruto-kun, in her mind. Some punks from the Hidden Sound also took offense. Whether it was from Naruto's challenging outburst or from stating that the hidden sound was a minor and insignificant village, and picked a fight with Kabuto, only to be interrupted by a poof of smoke and a loud, "Quiet down, you worthless bastards." The smoke soon cleared, revealing a group of Chunins led by a large, scarred man who introduced himself as Morino Ibiki, the head examiner for the first test. After everyone was seated, Naruto heard a faint, he probably would have missed it was it not for his enhanced hearing, Naruto-kun, that caused him to turn to see a blushing Hinata, something which confused him to no end. The girl was acting like lovesick, albeit shy fangirl, and that just didn't make any sense. "Let's do our best," came out in a stuttering voice, to which Naruto replied with an absent nod. He was at the time trying to badger Kyuubi into helping with the test. Continuing his argument with the demon fox, he, in an effort to get more comfortable as it was somewhat hot in the classroom, removed his vest, causing, much to Kyuubi's amusement, a stifled gasp from blushing Hinata, who quickly covered her nose with a handkerchief. On a related note, there were similar reactions from several other females who got a good view of Naruto in a revealing fishnet shirt. Not soon after Ibiki had explained the rules of the exam, making Naruto sweat lightly from the intense killer intent that was flowing towards him from two distinct sources, namely his teammates. After the exam begun, Naruto quickly scanned the questions with Kyuubi, who after some coaxing had agreed to help, although Naruto couldn't for the life of him understand why Kyuubi would want to be called Hugh-chan, the greatest scientific genius in the universe. Before agreeing to help, he shrugged it off as a probable girl thing. The questions were hard, too hard for most genin, and there was something weird about the 10th question. "There's a catch here, Kit. There's something about that 10th question, I'm most curious. Anyway, you could just take a nap and we'll answer that last question correctly. Saves us the trouble of writing all sorts of complicated equations on the small amount of space allotted." With that and a small giggle, Kyuubi was again immersed in her plan to make Naruto realize that Hinata had a crush on him, and dreaming about the power of grandchildren, with a combination of Byakugan and Naruto's demonic blood, she let out loose another barrage of giggles, causing Naruto to wonder just what the hell was the damn fox plotting. He soon got bored though. Napping just wasn't an option when there was so much tension in the air. Not to mention that the killer intent he'd felt earlier had intensified when he had tried to take a nice nap. Deciding to be creative, he began to doodle on the answer boxes, blissfully unaware that Hinata could see what he was doing with her Byakugan and was mortified by this carefree attitude. A soft whisper of, "Naruto-kun, you can look at my test," from his right side interrupted his doodling. Quickly glancing over, he noticed a blushing, as per usual, Hinata, who was holding out her test paper for him to see and whispering, "You can look at my answers, Naruto-kun." He quickly declined, hastened by the scratching of pens he heard from the watchdogs, explaining that he was just passing time until he got the last question and pointing out that she might get into trouble from helping him. He was confused by Hinata again though. No one had ever offered to do something like this for him. More he thought about it, the louder Kyuubi's giggles, snorts and outright laughter got. The bastard fox obviously knew but didn't volunteer info. He went through a myriad of reasons but none of them seemed to fit. Maybe she was trying to set me up with false info or something, but that doesn't seem to me like something Hinata would do. Hey, maybe she's in love with me or something. Shaking his head in amusement, he dismissed the idea as absurd and continued his artistic work. Some time and several abstract pieces of art later, the head examiner Morino Ibiki announced his do-or-die rule for the 10th question. Naruto tensed initially but soon relaxed as Kyuubi explained her theory of the question. "Quite clever, this human. I bet he's using this as a trick question to see who's willing to risk it all to continue. It might be enjoyable to talk with this one someday. He seems well versed in psychology." The now reassured Naruto raised his hand and then slammed it into the table, yelling, "Don't underestimate me. I will not run, and even if I will remain genin forever, I'll still become Hokage somehow. I'm not afraid." This caused the tension to deflate instantly and made Ibiki cringe, as the few who had been teetering on the edge of giving up apparently grew a spine after Naruto's outburst. He smiled and said, You all who stayed have now passed the first part of the exam, and began to explain exactly why they had passed while taking note that Naruto had started furiously scribbling something to his test sheet. Interesting guy, this Uzumaki Naruto. Ibiki had just wished them luck when a ball of cloth shot through the window, and then with the help of several kunai turned into a banner, heralding the entrance of the examiner of the second test, Mitarashi Anko. The examiner was quite baffled when there was almost no reaction from the group who had the collective thought of she's just as loud as that blonde moron running through their minds, but shrugged it off and began to question Ibiki about why there were so 26 teams still left, followed by a statement that she would reduce the numbers by at least half. After that she gathered the Chunin hopefuls, of whom some were quite anxious by that last statement, and led them towards training area 44, leaving behind Ibiki in the now empty classroom. Ibiki, his curiosity roused by Naruto's antics, took note of the blonde's test sheet. To his amusement, the answer boxes had been turned into cartoon screens that depicted someone, who apparently was Naruto, beating up others participants of the exam. On the bottom left box was a surprise though. A doodle of a fox with 9 tails was drawn there with a word balloon that said, "Nice work on the test, Ibiki-san. For a human, though you could have upped the pressure a bit. If you want tips on making it nastier for the future takers, do pay the boy a visit. He didn't move a muscle for a long time until he, all the while chuckling, folded the sheet and went to look for the Hokage. Interesting guy indeed." Near training area 44 or the Forest of Death, Anko was attempting to scare her charges only to be foiled by Naruto, who made a quite comic imitation of her Forest of Death introduction and, what was worse, caused amusement instead of trepidation among the genins. Deciding to make an example of the blonde, she flipped out a kunai and threw it towards Naruto, slicing open his cheek and causing lovely red blood to spill out, tasty blood that she was happily licking off Naruto's cheek. After having her kunai returned by a long-tongued ninja from the hidden grass, she remarked in a suitably cheery voice, "Looks like we have a lot bloodthirsty ones in the test. This should be fun." Succeeding in totally creeping most of the genins out, she began to give out consent forms. Naruto was troubled. Anko had given them 30 minutes to decide whether or not to sign their forms. That didn't bother him. He had signed his and was quite sure that both Sakura and Sasuke would sign theirs as well. What bothered him was the weight of responsibility. He was the leader and he was supposed to come up with a plan of sorts that would get them through a difficult mission that could last 5 days. More than that, he was supposed to make a plan that would not only keep them alive but keep them in the exam as well. Sighing, he absently scratched a kai, a habit he had developed when he was in deep thought, and stopped his aimless walking when he noticed Hinata, who seemed to be in deep thought too. I really should thank her for that offer of help during the first exam. With this though, he headed towards the girl and called out, "Hey Hinata, what are you doing here?" Hinata stiffened, blushed and turned towards Naruto while stuttering out, "Naruto-kun, She then noticed the cut on Naruto's cheek and rummaged through her equipment pouch for a jar of healing salve she'd made herself, and in her haste totally ignoring Naruto, who was thanking her. Much to Naruto's amazement, she then lifted the jar of salve while mumbling out a, "Anyo, here, salve, wound." "Huh, what's this? Healing salve for my cheek or something? Sheesh, there she goes again. First trying to help me at the exam and now this. Hey, maybe she really does like me or something." Taking the salve and nearly causing Hinata to faint when their hands accidentally brushed together, he said, "Hey Hinata, I actually was trying to thank you for what you did in the exam and now you give me a healing salve. I really can't take all of this, you know. Why am I such a weakling that I can't tell him? I must be stronger and tell him that I know he isn't the Kyuubi, that he's someone I look up to." Blushing furiously, she struggled to gather courage and let out a, "Naruto-kun, please, you must," after which she hung her head. "Damn it, Hyuga Hinata, you are so weak." Naruto only shook her head at the girl but decided that it would be impolite not to accept the gift. "Well, if you insist then, I guess I'll take it." He flashed out a dazzling smile, causing the shy Hyuga's heartbeat go wild. "But in return, you'll have to let me treat you to some deluxe ramen at Ichiraku's as way of saying thank you." This pretty much froze Hinata's mind, After all, she'd just been asked out by none other than Naruto-kun, but she did manage a strangled hi and a shy nod. Seeing as that was settled, Naruto bid a brief farewell, pointedly ignoring the hoots and catcalls from Kyuubi, and set out to find his team to discuss the plan he had formed. Soon after, he found both Sasuke and Sakura, who had their consent forms ready and signed. In a hushed tone, he told them to listen up. I think we should head towards the tower using our best speed. If we meet any other teams on the way, we take them out and hope they have the right scroll on them. If not, then we set up traps near the tower and ambush any teams that come our way until we get the right one. Then we enter the tower, which I think is a safe zone, to wait out the remaining time. After explaining his plan, he asked for opinions. Sakura and Sasuke both agreed, as they had been thinking on the same lines themselves, though Sasuke wanted to stay near the tower and ambush more teams, an idea that Naruto, and surprisingly, Sakura both opposed. Not soon later, Team 7 was heading towards the tower. Naruto was running point, carrying a kai and keeping a keen eye, ear and nose to the surrounding. They were followed by Sakura, while Sasuke, carrying their heaven scroll, was bringing up the rear some 25 meters behind Naruto. After about 20 or so minutes later, Naruto, on Sakura's request, called for a break. Deciding that it was a good time to answer the call of nature, he let a kai out of her pouch and went, again on Sakura's request, some distance away to do his business, only to be ambushed by a trio of mist nins. Well, they didn't really ambush him. He heard them coming even before the clearing he was on began to fill with mist. Hey, that won't work too well against me, I'm afraid. Maybe we'll get lucky and they have an earth scroll. The mist nins, who'd been certain of an easy victory, soon realized that the mist they had created hindered them more than it did their intended prey. And that their prey wasn't all that alone when all of them were simultaneously and efficiently pummeled into oblivion by Naruto and 5 aiding clones. The mist faded along with the consciousness of the mist nins, leaving Naruto and the clones free to search their bodies, and soon one of the widely grinning clones tossed Naruto a scroll. Too bad it was a heaven scroll though, but still, when combined with a stack of explosive tags, he'd found not bad loot for such an easy job. Snickering to himself about the stupidity of his would-be stalkers and about the dismay Sasuke would feel from not having been in the fight, he dismissed the clones, finished his business and headed back towards the others, and received a fist-in-face's greeting from Sasuke. Flying backwards against a tree, he yelled in confusion, "What the hell did you do that for, you bastard?" Sasuke meanwhile was stalking Naruto and demanded to know where the real Naruto was. Seeing the confusion, he pointed at Naruto, and declared that he was a fake because there was no cut on his cheek. This caused the said Naruto to feel his cheek and exclaim, "Wow, you were right, Tem, it's healed. That stuff Hinata gave me must be amazing." Standing up, he glared at Sasuke, "And you, I'm the real Naruto and Akai-chan can prove it for me." Much to Sakura's relief and Sasuke's dismay, the said fox happily bounced to Naruto and began yapping away, causing Naruto to nod at his pet fox. Yes, Akai-chan, he's a degenerate bastard who's paranoid, for a good reason though. I ran into some trouble and all. Naruto didn't have time to explain about the trouble he had been in as a violent gust of wind suddenly swept him off his feet and into the air. When he came to his senses, the first thing he noticed was that he wasn't alone, though given the company of an overtly large snake he would have preferred to be. The snake wasted no time in attacking, and while Naruto managed to dodge the initial attack, he wasn't able to avoid the tail and was subsequently swallowed. His discomfort at the thought of being eaten was heightened by a slight tingling of his skin that began immediately after he was swallowed into the snake's gullet, and Kyuubi's disdainful, "Kid, I seriously don't feel like turning into snake shit." Thinking for ways to get out from the snake's digestive tract, he thought about burning his way out with foxfire, but just as he was about to do so, he remembered something else, a mental image of him and Sasuke eating too much and then barfing. Several moments of silence followed before a muffled, "Take this. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," was heard, followed by the snake suffering a lethal overdose of Uzumaki Naruto. Sniffing himself in disgust, Naruto performed a set of hand seals to activate a low-level water jutsu that he used to douse himself with water. Sniffing himself again, he decided that the stench was bearable until he found his team and/or a stream, whichever came first. Meanwhile, Sakura and Akai-chan, who had found Sakura only minutes after the wind had hit, met with Sasuke, who was, judging from Akai's behavior, the real deal. They were at the moment following Akai towards the direction where Naruto had flown off to when they came face to face with the boy in question, only to go defensive when Akai began to growl furiously at the imposter. The dispelling henge revealed none other than the long-tongued ninja from the hidden grass. Annoying pet you got there. Belongs to the blonde loudmouth, does it not? Well, no matter. This only makes it more fun. The creepy ninja then pulled out an earth scroll, wrapped his freakish tongue around it, and of all things swallowed the scroll whole. Now, let's begin the battle for each other's scrolls, with our lives. They were struck down mercilessly, kunais stabbed into their skulls as they watched helplessly. Sasuke lost the contents of his stomach at the overwhelming fear. Struggling against it, he managed to pull out a kunai and in a final act of desperation plunge it into his own leg to distract himself from the fear. The last-ditch attempt worked too. He was able to pull Sakura out of harm's way. Pulling out the kunai that was still in his thigh, he silenced Sakura. Sakura, however, managed to free herself and scream out, "Sasuke-kun, snake!" just in time for them to evade the attacking reptile. Peppering the offending animal with shurikens, Sasuke landed panting, only to see its skin crack to reveal the, now even creepier, grass ninja, who instantly began to slither around a tree branch only to be stopped by a few well-placed shurikens. There, on a higher tree branch, dirty and with a confident grin on his face, stood none other than the Uzumaki Naruto. "Sorry for being late, guys, but I had a dinner engagement I couldn't talk my way out of." The grass nin sneered at this. "Looks like you successfully defeated my giant snake, Naruto-kun. Maybe you aren't as worthless as you initially look like." Naruto wasn't least bit intimidated. "So it was you, huh? Well, your snake ate something that didn't agree with his stomach, a severe case of indigestion, I'm afraid." He was about to goad the snake freak some more but was cut off by Sasuke, who decided to play politician and surrender their scroll to the grass nin. This didn't sit well with Naruto though, and he jumped to grab the scroll and punch Sasuke. "What the hell are you doing, you cowardly bastard? Just because you are too scared to fight doesn't mean you can do what the hell you want, and there's no guarantee that this freak would let us go even if you gave him the scroll." Sasuke was about to retort but was cut short from a chilling cackle that came from the grass nin. "You are correct, Naruto-kun. I have no need to let you go, seeing as I can easily kill you for the scroll." He began to leak out killing intent from his eyes again in an attempt to paralyze his victims, an attempt that worked on Sakura, Sasuke, and apparently Naruto, then again maybe not. Naruto was frozen, yes, but not because of fear. He was frozen because the eyes that stared him from the face of this grass nin were the same eyes that he'd seen in his dream, eyes he'd seen when the Sandaime had used a henge to transform into a likeness of Orochimaru. In a burst of primal rage, he dashed forward, only to be slammed towards a nearby tree by the tail of a snake that had suddenly appeared in a cloud of smoke. This didn't slow him down though. He wiped his mouth clean of blood, ran his tongue across the now menacing fangs that had formed, and grabbed half a dozen shurikens. Throwing them towards the snake summoner, who was smiling somewhat conceitedly, he yelled out, "Shuriken Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," turning the 6 shurikens into a hailstorm of 6 dozen shurikens. Orochimaru was no longer smiling. He had managed to dodge the shurikens, but they had effectively pummeled his summoned snake out of existence, and the brat was now stalking him in the eyes. "Orochimaru, I will kill you. You set Kyuubi against Konoha, you bastard, and because of you I had to grow without parents." There was no mistaking it. This was the Kyuubi brat, but how in the 9 hells did he know about his involvement in the Kyuubi attack, and how had he recognized him? Orochimaru was again forced on the defensive when another 6 dozen shurikens came flying towards him. This time the shurikens were only covering a nastier surprise. 2 kunai, wreathed in odd blue flame came in the shadow of the shurikens. He managed to dodge one, but the other embedded itself in his left hand, causing the most excruciating pain he'd felt in some time. The wound began to bleed out bluish flames as Naruto's foxfire spread outwards from the kunai. This was one of his better tricks, though he could only maintain it for a few moments. The foxfire suddenly blinked out of existence, leaving dumbfounded Orochimaru staring at his blackened hand, and more specifically the kunai itself and a familiar seal that was engraved into it. With an evil grin he turned towards the cubified Naruto and said, "Kukukuku," so he sealed it inside his own whelp, this almost too deliciously ironic to be true. "Had you not caused me so much pain I would be inclined to invite to join me Naruto-kun, but alas you may have cost me a hand so in return." With that he shot out with speed that was beyond anything Naruto had seen and appeared before the startled boy. He then produced his freakish tongue and wrapped it around Naruto, uncovering his stomach at the same time. "Kukuku, so the seal is transferring energy to you Naruto-kun, we'll have none of that now. Gogyo Fuin." With that he slammed his right hand onto the existing seal, causing Naruto to yell out in pain. Then, after grabbing the heaven scroll, with a disdainful flick of his tongue he hurled the boy away and turned to the two remaining members of Team 7. Sakura, who had shaken herself from the fear, saw Naruto fall and threw a kunai which pinned the blonde into a tree. She began to yell to Sasuke and managed to spark some response from the petrified boy. Sasuke then began a furious battle with the miffed Orochimaru and was doing rather well against him, seeing how he was almost unable to use his left hand. He managed to trap Orochimaru with chakra strings and then burn off his face, only to be again immobilized by him. Before leaving he bit Sasuke on the neck and said, "Sasuke-kun will seek me out, to seek power and to become strong like Naruto-kun, it's not like he can otherwise." With that he sunk into the tree branch and vanished, leaving a collapsing Sasuke and panicking Sakura behind. Naruto was feeling like crap. He hadn't passed out when that bastard Orochimaru did something to his seal, but it had been a close call. He'd managed, with help from Sakura, drag himself into a nearby cave where he promptly collapsed and fell asleep. When he woke up it was nearly dawn and he wasn't feeling any better either. He was feeling crippled, actually, as if something that had always been part of him was missing. Pulling up his vest he stared at his stomach and there it was, the seal had now additional markings. Few tests later he realized that not only did the additional seal block him off from Kyuubi's chakra, it also pretty much crippled or unbalanced his own chakra system. Frowning, Naruto sat up and motioned for Sakura. "Sakura-chan, that bastard Orochimaru did something really weird to me and totally messed up my chakra system. I'm going to try and see if I can fix it, but it'll take some time, so could you please stand guard a bit longer, or would you like to rest right away?" Sakura, who was relieved beyond words, quickly nodded. "It's my turn to be useful, so try and fix yourself up if you can, but don't take too long though, it's been a long night." She practically beamed at Naruto, who flashed a foxy smile in return and then lied back, closing his eyes. Naruto concentrated and then found himself in the corner of his mind that he dubbed as Kyuubi's realm. Earlier he had, following a request and instructions from Kyuubi, modified the surroundings from dank sewer into a sunny forest meadow with a small pond and a lively stream, and turned the cage that bound Kyuubi into a cutesy collar. Looking about he saw no sign of Kyuubi, but there was a dome of red and black energy near the stream. Making his way to the dome he could see Kyuubi frantically pacing inside the dome. She stopped her pacing on the instant that she noticed Naruto and obviously tried to yell at the boy. Naruto was relieved too. She wasn't dead at least, but soon grew frustrated when they couldn't communicate. No sound passed through the dome and he really couldn't make out Kyuubi's weird sign language, so he only pointed at the new seal and then signed something he hoped Kyuubi would understand as, "I'll try and get help," and turned to leave. Naruto snapped back into the real world only to see Sasuke, covered with what appeared to be moving flame-like tattoos and feeling really off, brutally breaking the arms of a sound nin. He really didn't quite understand what the hell was happening. This wasn't Sasuke, was it? He also took note of Team 10 and Lee, who was laying sprawled on the ground. What the hell happened? Why his thick brows hurt, and what's wrong with Sasuke Tem? He stood up groaning while warily watching the Sound Nin leader leave an earth scroll on the ground. Yo, what the hell is going on here? He immediately regretted asking when Sakura and Ino both launched into a heated explanation about Sasuke-kun's heroics. Sighing, he leaned over to Shikamaru, who in a low tone summed up the events for him. So basically, those Sound guys beat up Lee, and then you guys and then Sasuke did his thing. He scratched his head. Well, now that we have both scrolls, we'll just head out to the tower. It shouldn't be too far. He checked the position of the sun. We should be there before midday. Sasuke scoffed at this. Dobi, we only have one scroll. He then tossed a calculative glance at the Ino Shika Cho trio, making them sweat slightly. Before he could even suggest that they take the scroll from Team 10, Naruto fished out another heaven scroll and said, "We have both scrolls, Sasuke, though not thanks to you. What the hell were you thinking anyway, trying to give our scroll away to that bastard Orochimaru? Luckily, I ran into 3 mist nins that had a heaven scroll when I was meeting nature's call, so to speak." Walking over Sakura, he began to bandage her wounds. "You could have at least tried fighting before chickening out and trying to buy your way out of the situation. Well, no matter, he won't be using that hand of his for some time now." He finished his ministrations and again marveled the efficiency of Hinata's salve. It had visibly relieved the pain and had begun to slightly mend the wounds before he even could cover them with bandages. Standing up, he looked about again. "Right, now let's go. I want to be in that tower before lunch." And so they left, leaving behind Shikamaru and Choji, who were eyeing the starry-eyed Ino rather nervously. They recognized the danger signs. Ino was quickly fixating on yet another idol, though they had to admit that it had been rather unnerving to see the dead last casually mention that he'd run into 3 mist nins and that he had managed to hurt the infamous Orochimaru. Nudging his friend, Choji whispered, "Do you think we should warn him? I mean, he's not a close friend or anything, but it would be the humane thing to do." He received no answer as they both suddenly felt the pressure of barely controlled killer intent that was radiating from Ino. Oblivious to their predicament, Naruto and the rest of Team 7 made it towards the tower with good speed despite their injuries. Other than a giant centipede, they didn't meet any nasty surprises on the way and made good time, arriving some time before midday. Wasting no time, they puzzled out the mystery of the scrolls and used them to summon none other than Iruka-sensei, who profusely congratulated them on passing the second exam. Naruto, suppressing his urge to jump up and down in excitement, requested that they be allowed to see the Hokage. "We ran into little trouble on our way here." Orochimaru made an appearance, so the name Orochimaru had almost magic-like effect. Iruka quickly ordered them to follow and led them to the upper levels of the tower, and then ordered them to stay there and wait before disappearing through a door. Sasuke was seething as he listened Naruto's debriefing. "I'll kill him. I'll hurt him. I specifically told him not to mention the bite that I got from Orochimaru, and what does the Dobi do? Blabs it all out. Even describes how my chakra felt. Evil. When I transformed. PFFT, he's just jealous and is now acting all high and mighty leader." He then glared at Sakura, who was nodding timidly to confirm what Naruto was saying. "They're holding me back. That's what they're doing. I felt that strength and I needed to kill Itachi. Nothing else matters, and if that Dobi is trying to stand in my way." The Sandaime and Kakashi were both looking troubled as they listened to Naruto's debriefing. They had already heard of Orochimaru's involvement from Anko, who'd met the wounded Sannin. What they didn't know was that it had been Naruto who had caused the wound, which, according to Anko, had all but crippled him. They exchanged worried glances when Naruto mentioned the seal that was placed on his stomach and the bite on Sasuke. Finally, after the debriefing was over, the old man spoke. "Kakashi, I trust you can perform a Fujihoin to take care of Sasuke's problem while I'll remove the seal placed on Naruto." Dismissing Kakashi along with Sasuke and Sakura, he then turned to Naruto. "Now Naruto, lift up your shirt and I'll fix you right up." Naruto was again feeling great. He had a belly full of food, and what was best, the quarters they were given came with complete bathing facilities. He'd immediately, earning multitude of curses from Sakura, called the first bathing turn. After a nice long shower, he'd enjoyed even longer soak in the tub with Akai, who despite her initial reluctance towards bathing had quickly learned to enjoy nice warm soaks. He had washed his clothing too and was now wearing clean and, thanks to clever use of foxfire, mostly dry clothing. Only thing that was bugging him was the sulking Sasuke, who kept glaring at him with murder in his eyes. He shrugged and decided that it was time to go for a walk, let Sakura-chan deal with that grouch. He was happy to note that the area meant for the participants of the exams was large, not to mention a strict, no fighting, zone, with open-air balconies to that gave a good view of the forest and a multitude of rooms with training equipment ranging from dumbbells to training dummies. Feeling still bit worn out from the whole Forest of Death episode, he decided that a nice relaxing napping session on one of the balconies would be a good idea. I won't be caught making fun of that name again though, Forest of Death indeed. So he headed to one of the balconies. 1 hour later he was still resting comfortably on a chair with Akai-chan curled up in a ball on top of his chest. He was currently idly fingering the jar of salve he'd gotten from Hinata. Man, this stuff was great. I wonder if Hinata even realizes how much this helped me. Hope she makes it through the forest though. Even without Orochimaru it was though going. Seeing her Naruto-nichan looking thoughtful and fingering the jar given to him by that nice girl, Akai decided to start a conversation. Hinata was walking around the tower hoping to find Naruto. She really didn't know if she would have the courage to say anything again, but maybe Naruto would at least notice her and confirm that she hadn't dreamed the part where he'd asked her out on a date. Well, not a date really. We'll just be eating ramen together. Oh my god, that sounds so much like a date. She was suddenly snapped out of fantasy where her Naruto-kun dropped on his knees, and when she heard a soft, cutesy voice say, "Nay Naru-chan, are you really going to take that girl out for ramen?" She almost suffered a heart attack there and then. Some floozy was trying to dissuade her Naruto-kun from taking her out. The veins surrounding her eyes bulged as she activated her Byakugan to find Naruto-kun and the bitch that was obviously pestering him. Maybe it was that Ino girl who had been dragging him to the clothing store. What she saw stole her breath away. Naruto was lounging on a chair with Akai sitting on his chest, and there was no sign of the tramp. But who was speaking then? I'm sure I heard. With her Byakugan she saw Akai's mouth move. Nay Naru Onichan, do you like her? It's obvious that she likes you. Are you going to ask her to bear your pups? She didn't even see Naruto blush. She was so shocked that someone would have noticed her secret crush, and a fox no less. She gasped, wait a minute. That fox can speak. She considered running away. It had worked before, but then noticed that Naruto and Akai were both staring at the balcony entrance with look that clearly said busted. Stealing her courage, she decided that it was time to tell Naruto-kun things. Naruto was indeed staring at the doorway with a feeling of dread, all the while berating himself for not paying more attention to his surroundings. Then he heard someone moving in the hallway, and soon the said someone entered the balcony. Both Naruto and Hinata were blushing badly. Naruto because he was sure that Hinata had heard Akai bluntly asking if he was going to ask her to bear his pups, and Hinata, for well, she really blushed whenever she came to 100 yards of Naruto. They both spoke at the same time. Nay Hinata, Anyo Naruto-kun. Naruto motioned furiously and blurted out, ladies first. Twiddling her fingers and fighting the urge to run, Hinata began to stutter. Anyo, Naruto-kun, did Akai-chan speak? Gomen, it's so silly, couldn't happen. Her eyes widened when Akai hopped off Naruto's lap and softly walked next to her and jumped up to her arms. She still began to pet the adorable little kid, who yapped softly to Naruto, who began to nod his head. Hinata almost dropped the kid when she heard the same soft voice from her arms say, please don't tell anyone that I can speak, and Naruto continue, Akai-chan is somewhat special, as am I for that matter. Now this is an official secret of Konoha, so you can't tell anyone about it, but, well, you see, the thing is that, he was interrupted by Hinata's almost inaudible whisper of, "Kyuubi is sealed in you," which she breathed out clearly, if very quietly. Naruto almost fell from his chair. He was to say the least amazed and let it show too, so comical was his face that Hinata actually let loose a small giggle and blushed scarlet right afterwards. Regaining his senses, or at least some of them, the foxboy of Konoha managed to gasp out question as to exactly how had Hinata found out. This brought yet another session of finger twiddling and blushing from the girl. How can I tell Naruto-kun that I've been following him around? I'd sound like some weirdo stalker or something. Finally Naruto grew tired with the blushing and finger twiddling and firmly grabbed Hinata's hands, causing the shy Hyuga to swoon. Startled, he grabbed her before she hit the ground and quickly deposited her on the vacant chair. When Hinata regained her breathing, she tried to twiddle her fingers but found out that her hands were still being held by Naruto, who was peering at her face with a worried expression. "Please Hinata, don't faint on me now, and if you don't want to talk about it you don't have to. And I can understand if you don't want to go for that ramen after the exam either." Oh no. Now Naruto-kun thinks I don't like him anymore, not that I blame him for such fears, poor Naruto-kun. She, yet again, noticed that she couldn't poke her fingers together, so gathering her courage she stuttered, "Gomen Naruto-kun, I didn't mean, I mean I don't care and I'd like to be your friend." Now she really would have liked to say girlfriend, instead of just friend, but as always her courage failed her. At least I'll be his friend, and maybe, just maybe, she suddenly saw it in her mind's eye. They were practicing together and she tripped and Naruto-kun was there to catch her, their faces almost touching. She could almost hear him saying, "Hinata, Hinata, hey Hinata." She snapped out of the daydream to see Naruto waving one hand before her face. She blinked, then mournfully realized that Naruto had let go of her hand. "Gomen Naruto-kun, I spaced out." She blushed again, realizing how close Naruto was and how confused he looked. "Anyo, I saw you telling the Hokage's grandson about the thing, and Kurenai-sensei has been teaching me how to lip read, so I found out, and then I ran away because I was shocked." Gomen, she hung her head at yet another admission of her weakness. Naruto didn't know what to do or say. Obviously Hinata felt bad for being shocked when she found out. To further add to his confusion, he was now face to face with the only person of his own age group that knew his secret, and yet she didn't want to scream or hate him but to be his friend. He decided to do as Kyuubi instructed and gently lifted Hinata's chin upwards till she was looking him in the eyes. He then flashed his wide smile at her and said, "Hey, don't worry about that Hinata, it's not like being shocked over something like that is bad or anything, and you aren't running away screaming either. But I have tons to tell you if you have the time." Badly blushing Hinata could only nod, and so Naruto launched into a long and amazing tale. Before Naruto, who was eagerly explaining everything that had happened since Wave Country, or Hinata, who was just as eager to hear about the exploits of her one and only love interest, noticed it was getting dark and Hinata's teammates, at Kiba's insistence, had come looking for her. Kiba naturally was furious when he saw what he considered his girl, and the stupid moron Naruto in such an intimate setting. It actually looked somewhat suspicious, a boy and a girl sitting side by side on a balcony that was facing a forest, and there was a sunset too. Luckily Shino, who said he wanted to stay outside for a moment, was there to prevent any bloodshed. Shyly waving goodbye, Hinata followed Kiba back inside with a happy bounce. Her Naruto-kun had been eagerly talking to her of all people. She blushed again and shot a last parting glance towards Naruto, who was still standing outside with Shino. Shino simply stood there watching. He didn't move or speak, and soon Naruto became uncomfortable under the silent eyes. He was just about to leave when Shino spoke up. "So it was because of Kyuubi that we were all told to stay away from you. Sometimes we do stupid things out of fear. Did you know that I too grew up without friends because I'm of the Aburame clan? No one wanted to play with the icky bug boy. Still, I have to hand it to you, you had it much harder than I did. I at least had family." For the second time today Naruto was not believing his ears. How many damn people know already? I mean, do I carry a sign that says, Kyuubi is sealed inside, please be quiet, or something? Sighing, he sat down and asked. And just how did you find out? And why are you telling me this? The bug user just shrugged. I have a bug placed on both of my teammates, and that bug just relayed it all to me, and I'm telling you because I don't think that you are a monster either. He turned to leave. Oh, and Kiba is in love with Hinata, who is in love with you, so watch your step. I'll try to keep him on a leash, so to speak, but you probably should avoid letting him see the two of you like he did today. It looked rather intimate. And if you are not going to act on this information, please let Hinata down easily, she really cares about you. With that, he left a stunned Naruto on the balcony. When he saw Hinata the next day, he made no mention of what Shino had told him. Hell, he wasn't even sure about how he felt about something like that himself. It wasn't unpleasant to think that someone loved you, but still, oh well, his ramen date with Hinata was still on, so he had plenty of time to think about it, and right now he needed to focus on the exam. Instead of talking about any romantic stuff, Naruto managed to coax Hinata into a nice sparring session, and was surprised with the level of skill she exhibited, and even more so when she apologized for not being better. For the next few days he regularly sparred with Hinata, and at her insistence, after she finally mustered the courage, told her more about his life. They'd gotten into a point where Hinata actually managed to speak without much of a stutter, albeit in a very tiny voice, and only blushed, stuttered noticeably, and/or poked her fingers when her eyes met Naruto's. They were often joined by Lee, who had arrived at the tower on the third day. They were also watched by Kiba and Akamaru, who, to Kiba's dismay, really didn't watch Naruto but instead played around with Akai and generally spent time bonding with the fox when they were both petted profusely by Hinata. Naruto was also pretty sure that he'd seen Sasuke on occasion, skulking in the shadows with his Sharingan active and watching as they sparred, copying their techniques, which was the very reason he'd suggested that they only use the basic stuff. He'd also seen Gaara and his siblings, and the changes on their appearances were rather dramatic. Gaara's insomniac look had been passed on to his siblings Temari and Kankuro, who now looked like they hadn't slept a wink in days. Gaara, on the other hand, looked quite well rested, though there still were slight remnants of the black rings that surrounded his eyes. The smirking boy told Naruto that he was yet to tell the two about what had occurred over a week ago, and that his siblings still feared that Shukaku would suddenly devour his soul and come out unchecked. All in all, Gaara was in a good mood and behaved almost amiably towards the Leaf Genins when Naruto introduced them. Soon the 120 hours of the second exam had passed, and all the Genins who had made it to the tower were called to the central room. It was time for the third round, and some serious is kicking. TBC, in 2 to 4 days or something. Author's rant. Gogyo Fuin stands for 5 elements seal. Fuja Hoin stands for evil sealing method. Oopsie, I submitted this without the ending paragraph first. Well, not much harm done there, I guess. First, I'd like to thank all you reviewers for the input you gave. As you may have noticed, it's Doby now, and that Naruto had 1A and 1B class missions done. A class was the wave country thingy, and B class was when he kicked Mizuki around like a rag doll. I would like to point out that writing stuff that Hinata would say was pretty damn hard, mostly because she really only says, well, nothing really in either manga or anime. And her thoughts are mostly, Naruto-kun winking face, oh well, I hope it came out okay though. Oh, and all her lines are stuttered out if you didn't notice. I just didn't feel like writing at li licky t this. No, Naruto can't draw well. His artistic creations were more in par with Rukia's bunny depictions of hollows in Bleach, which is a great manga, by the way, read it. It even has more than a few women in it that can compete with Tsunade on equal ground when it comes to long-sized cheeky smiley face. Yes, Ino is now fixated on both Naruto and Sasuke, and no, she didn't kill her teammates in the forest, only slight dislocation of joints and the like. And yes, Kyuubi now has a collar with the word seal on it, and yes, she lives in a nice little forest clearing surrounded by flowers and butterflies and all the works. They milled about, some slightly nervous while others radiated confidence. Naruto looked around and noticed that surprisingly few teams had made it to the tower in the time given. He himself included, there were only 21 people gathered in the large room. Actually, the only people he hadn't seen during his stay in the tower and the only new arrivals were Kabuto and his two teammates. 7 teams, we were cut down from 27 to just 7, that forest certainly lived up to its name. He also took note of the assembled Junin and the Hokage, who began to explain the reasons behind the Chunin selection exams. Much to his discomfort, he also noticed Anko, who was watching him with a hungry, predatory gleam in her eyes, just like she had when she was licking his bloody cheek. He struggled to suppress the overwhelming urge to shudder. He tuned out the Hokage and concentrated instead on Guy and Kakashi, who had a much more interesting talk. He mentally snickered at Guy's reaction to Kakashi's innocent, "Huh. You said something," and began to plot out possible ways to use the same tactic on Sasuke. His focus snapped back to the old man, who was about to begin explaining the rules for the third exam when a sickly-looking man with a bad cough interrupted and requested that he, as a referee, would be allowed to explain the rules and such. He then launched into an explanation as to how there were too many participants to make it and there was a need for a preliminary. Interrupted by several coughs, he said, "Those who are not feeling well enough to fight and those who feel like quitting, please come forward so we may begin the preliminaries immediately." There was a slight murmur that ran through the assembled genin. Naruto was, quite frankly, surprised when only Kabuto raised his hand to indicate that he would withdraw from the competition. Naruto began to loudly question as to why Kabuto would give up so easily and received an answer of, "I'm sorry Naruto-kun, but I'm all beat up and I haven't been able to hear with my left ear since that scuffle with the sound nins," which was something Naruto didn't quite believe. Thick Bros took the same hit, twice even, and his ears are working just fine. And for that beat up part, well, you look about as fresh as everyone else here. Humph. Maybe you are a 7th-time veteran because you lack guts. Without further interruptions, Kabuto was removed from the contest. Only 20 genins remained. Naruto watched carefully as Gecko Hayate, as the Junin had introduced himself, began to explain the rules of the preliminary matches. There was something about this Junin that didn't just add up. He looked as he had one leg in the grave already, and yet, that one is clever, I think. The cough is genuine but not the result of a disease or sickness, and the dying look he has is probably a genjutsu that makes him look sick. You already noticed that he doesn't have the smell of sickness about him. This caused Naruto to pause. Smell of sickness? He asked silently, only to hear Kyuubi snort disdainfully. You will understand when you visit a hospital. Anyway, enough of this kid or you will miss the fun rules, like, there are no rules and such. He began to shiver with anticipation, like so many others, while some shivered in trepidation, when the scoreboard that would decide the matches began to roll through names. Naruto felt mildly annoyed that it had to be Sasuke Tem who got to fight in the first match. Hayate coughed. The first fight is between Akado Yoroi and Uchiha Sasuke. Are the contestants ready? When both indicated that they were, Hayate cleared his throat and said, "Well then, we'll begin the first match shortly, so would everyone except the 2 participants move to the upper level?" As everyone began to walk towards the stairs, Kakashi brushed behind Sasuke and whispered, "Sasuke, remember that your own will is what partially keeps Orochimaru's curse in check. And if you activate that curse, the match will be instantly stopped and you will be placed under Anbu guard." This caused Sasuke to falter. They were again trying to limit his growth, but still, he didn't want to be removed from the contest until he had the chance to beat Naruto to a pulp. The Dobi deserved to be dropped down a few notches, and it was his job as the Rookie of the Year and his teammate to do it. Smirking confidently, he took a loose, ready stance and faced his opponent. Up in the stands, everyone had settled down to watch the match. Sakura was rather worried about her Sasuke-kun, who had been colder than usual after their encounter with Orochimaru. He'd been almost hostile when she tried to talk with him. Maybe we shouldn't have told about the bite. It was Sasuke-kun's business after all, and he is strong enough to know best himself. She sighed again, she was so confused. She believed in Sasuke, but on the other hand, the look of concern on Kakashi-sensei's face when Naruto had told about the incident had been noticeable, even with the mask. And then there was the seal that was, why am I doubting Sasuke-kun? He's one of us that has the best chance of coming a Chunin, isn't he? Not even Naruto can compete with him, can he? She shoved the doubt aside and began to cheer as Sasuke delivered the first blow. Down in the arena, Sasuke, though he was doing rather well, he'd cornered Yoroi using his superior speed to deflect several shuriken thrown at him and then ran in and grappled with him. Only to have Yoroi start draining his chakra reserves with some weird technique. Kicking him off to make some distance, Sasuke began to formulate a plan. Good thing he had been able to watch that weirdo Lee practice with Naruto. Flashing through several hand seals he performed Kaden, Hosenka no Jutsu, Fire Style, Phoenix Flower Technique, and tossed in a few shurikens while blowing the small balls of flame towards Yoroi. Using the opportunity to attack the now distracted man, he quickly ducked under his guard and sent him flying with a swift kick to the chin. He then pushed himself up into air and under Yoroi's shadow and delivered a swift spin kick that Yoroi was able to block. Undaunted, he spun again and this time punched Yoroi and then punched him again, launching the genin towards the floor below. Just as they were about to land, Sasuke delivered a final spin kick and yelled out the name of his new attack, Shishi Renden. Lion Combo. Blood spurted from Yoroi's mouth as Sasuke stood up and dusted himself off and turned to flash a satisfied smirk towards Naruto. Chew on that, Dobi, the power of the Sharingan is something you definitely can't beat. It was quite amusing how you tried to keep me from gaining power after you noticed that I was watching your little training sessions. You should feel privileged that I would use you to gain power. He smirked again when he heard Hayate declare him as the winner of the first match and the first one to pass the prelims. Feeling satisfied, he headed towards the stairs to watch the rest of the matches. I just hope the Dobi draws someone weak so he'll win. I so want to put him to his place in front of a large audience. Up in the stands, Naruto was seething. So Sasuke Tem had been able to copy Lee's prized technique before Naruto had noticed him skulking about. He really didn't mind using Sharingan or his own Shinkugan to break down and copy techniques from the enemy, but somehow it just felt wrong that Sasuke would sneak in and steal a technique that had taken Lee countless of hours of hard work to achieve. He shook his head in disgust at Sasuke's self-satisfied look and the way several unnamed fangirls fawned at him as if he'd done something marvelous. I just hope I get to fight him in the third exam. He needs to be dropped down a few pegs, no strike that few dozen pegs. Lee was having similar thoughts. He felt himself somehow slighted, not because Sasuke had copied the initial stage of his technique but because the way he'd done it. Lee knew that Naruto was able to perform Konoha Senpu perfectly because of his bloodline limit, but he didn't care. Naruto had worked hard to achieve that level of skill, maybe not hard as he had himself, but still. He sighed in a tired tone. Uchiha Sasuke, your Sharingan is truly fearsome, but the way you use it is an affront to those who work hard. To copy your enemy's techniques is one thing, to spy on your comrades